In the annual happiness report, there were some fairly interesting findings for the under 30 crowd commonly known as Gen Z. Between 2006 and 2023, happiness took a precipitous fall for Americans under 30. In fact, in much of the Anglo-speaking world, the happiness quotient has fallen. That is, in stark contrast to most of the rest of the world. The report, which is produced by Gallup, Oxford, the UN, and the World Happiness Editorial Board, found that happiness has risen sharply in Central and Eastern Europe, along the former Soviet Union, and East Asia. One article in The Atlantic took a deep dive speaking to the authors and psychologists to hypothesize what may be the root cause. His theory, it is the globalization of Western and American despair. So what do you think, Amber? Are you happy?
I'm pretty happy, yeah, but I would say that the lack of happiness among young people in America really troubles me. It's something I actually spend a decent amount of time thinking and writing about. I don't think there's any one cause. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of young people who actually say climate change anxiety is driving a lot of their misgivings about their place in the world. There's a lot who are addicted to social media and are sort of fed a feedback loop of really negative content that harms their self-image and their idea of what's going on. Some of them spend too much time engaged in news and politics. And some of them, unfortunately, I think are being overprescribed SSRIs, which, if not used properly, can actually increase symptoms of depression and anxiety. So there's a lot going on that you probably can't break down in just a single segment, but needless to say, it's not, we're not getting any idea that they're getting better as they're getting older. And so whatever we've been trying hasn't been working, and I hope we can figure out some way to help get these people back on track.
I think a lot of the wage stagnation we've seen since the 70s and the inflation of homes prices, there are all of these videos that are going viral on TikTok of people with mini microphones attached to their iPhones talking to older people, boomers and above, saying, what did you pay for your home? How many bedrooms does it have? Where is it? And it's astonishing hearing what the prices were, not just for that, but for college. The cost of living a normal and stable life is prohibitively expensive for so many people. There's no hope of a future. And I think that's a key part of happiness, not knowing how you're gonna pay your bills, not knowing if you'll ever have a stable home or financial security causes a lot of stress and anxiety. It's something that's been quantified by public health officials for a very long time and doctors as well. And so it's not just something that affects your state of mind, but your health in very many ways. And that, of course, translate to affect your happiness as well. And so I think the climate is something we're seeing a lot of kids concerned about, that we're inheriting a planet that we might not be able to live on. So regardless of how bad the economy is, if we don't have a planet we can live on, we have no economy. But I think for so many working people, it's hard to think about climate change and what's going to happen in a few years when you're worried about if you're going to be able to afford groceries and rent next week.
Yeah, I agree. In some ways, worrying about climate change is sort of a privileged position. The cost of living is really important because when we're talking about things that traditionally make people happy, just statistically, it's having a family, having a stable income and financial situation, you know, being married and having kids. Both men and women say they're happiest when they're married and have kids. And a lot of people feel that that dream is out of reach because of the prohibitively high cost of buying a home and being able to live on a single income. Especially, a lot of households now are double income, and there's a lot of polls of women who say when they have kids that they want to stay at home, but they don't feel like they can because they don't think that their husband's income is sufficient for them to give everything to their kids that they want to. And even if you just do a one-to-one comparison of what a one-income household was able to purchase versus now, it's not the case that everyone who's saying that just has a higher expectation of what they're able to afford for their kids, but just that even if you were to compare one-to-one apples to apples, it's just more expensive. Because you hear a lot, I think, from older generations, well, if they just buckle down stop buying the avocado toast or whatever, or if they didn't send their kids to private school, et cetera, that everything would be fine. And I think we see that even for people who do forego a lot of those luxuries, it is still on a adjusted basis more expensive than it was 30 years ago.
I'm sure you've seen this, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have this story, I don't know what you would call it, very common phrase, almost has become a meme, that hard times create tough men, and, you know, hard times create tough men do the right things, create easy times create soft men create hard times, and so on. And that somehow throughout history we're on this cycle, and these same people are looking at the hard times we're in and saying that we're the soft ones as we are enduring the hard times, not self-reflecting enough to realize, are we the soft men that created the hard times? I think all of these excuses of like, I worked hard and bought a home when I was young, why aren't you doing that? Well, it's impossible if you do the math on a minimum wage income. You can't afford rent and save for a home in this country and put yourself through school on a minimum wage job. It's just an entirely different economic environment for us. And so it's a lot easier to say kids are sad because of TikTok and Instagram and they're on their darn phones too much. That's a lot easier than really looking at what has led to this from a policy perspective. How have we let rampant greed produce conditions where corporate landlords are inflating prices so high that someone working a minimum wage job can't afford to live there? Really tanking the economy is not a fun environment to grow up in, and so we might be, you know, Amber, the tough men that are going to create the easier times.
I hope so. They also say just move back home and then you can afford a house because they're so much cheaper there, but that's not where the jobs are. So it's like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's obviously a lot of brain drain from those communities. Jobs are increasingly becoming more concentrated in big cities. Even with remote work, that's really sort of a luxury position as well, particularly if you're someone who works in a blue collar profession. So there's not a great way for people to just like creatively get around cost of living the way that I think some of our elders suspect that there is. And I'm not discounting the fact that there are a lot of people of the older generation who did work really hard. I know our parents are great examples of that, and we don't want to discount the fact that they did have to basically pull themselves up by their bootstraps and really buckle down and have a lot of sacrifices. But now we see that older generation doing really well in terms of retirement and general finances, while millennials and Gen Z don't have a lot of money saved up. A lot of them have not started investing in retirement because they're just trying to pay for rent or get by, and families and settling down seems so far off for them. People are getting married at later ages, having kids at much later ages, and then women find out that they can't have as many kids as they wanted to because they started too late. That can lead to a lot of issues with happiness as well. But I do think the social media is part of it too.
Yeah, I think it plays a role for sure. I don't think it's the main thing to blame. But it's a good point that parents like ours in working class households worked so hard, but they had to work so hard just to get by. In America, we're told that if you work really hard, you'll do really well. And the hardest working people will do the best in a meritocracy, but we really don't see that. And so the sort of weak men that have created the hard times, we're talking like members of Congress and people making decisions for the public based on how much lobbying money they're getting. That's a very weak decision to make, to say, I'm going to enrich myself, and instead of respecting our democracy and the people who elected me here to represent them, I'm going to make this about me. I'm going to line my pockets, work my 3 terms, get lifelong benefits, and get out of Congress. I think the representatives we've had have not considered the future they're creating and working class people across the country. And they've led to working class people becoming pretty tough, and honestly, the wealthiest people, the elites in our society, becoming kind of soft, saying things like, well, just vote for Joe Biden and everything will be fine. The economy's doing great. We don't need to change very much. When in reality, we need to change almost everything about how our economy is functioning for people to get by.
The Biden administration has been so bad about that condescending attitude where if people are worried about energy costs, they tell them to just buy the electric vehicle, get the solar panels. And it's like, I don't have $30,000 sitting around. And even if you give me a $7,000 tax credit, I don't have $23,000 sitting around. to just do that for my home, like it's incumbent on you to actually bring energy prices down and not require me to give this lump sum of cash to something that may or may not give me cheaper energy 10 years down the line. And then when we were having supply chain issues ahead of Christmas, Jen Psaki said that it was the tragedy of the treadmill that was delayed, basically discounting the fact that there were baby formula shortages and food shortages and all of these issues that actually affect families quite drastically. And it just showed really how out of touch that they are with working people. And unfortunately, that's become quite a trend among our political class. And then I'll just close with one final point, which is that one of the consistent threads among the younger generation who says that they're unhappy also reports a lack of purpose and meaninglessness. And I think that's something that even goes beyond the economic crunch that they're feeling. And my gut instinct is that the decline of both religion and community more generally have been a problem with people being unable to see the 20 to 30 to even 90-year out reward for what they're doing on Earth. And that can be something that usually provides comfort to people who are facing hard times, to be able to see beyond what the current day-to-day struggle is.
Absolutely. And while the Biden administration has allocated a ton of public investment in green energy, where we have a deficit, a lack of investment from the private sector, because it's not very profitable to make that transition, I think that there aren't enough constraints on bills like the CHIPS Act, where we have a lot of money going towards this investment, but how are we going to ensure that consumers enjoy, price reductions as a result of this legislation? And how are we going to ensure that these investments are creating good paid union jobs wherever they're happening, or just jobs that are stable enough and people are earning enough money to support a living? And I think that a policy is only as good as it is enforceable, and I just haven't seen enough constraints on these policies that ensure the positive impacts will benefit working people and not just the giants of these industries. But I think we're gonna have some guests on soon to help break that down. More Rising after this.